Yo, what's up, YouTube? Today, I'm going to attempt to justify all of the effort I put into being a healer in this dead video game. And the reason I'm making this video in the first place is because a viewer of mine named Dalton told me that someone in his guild wrote some woke as fuck document which outlines why healing parses are irrelevant and harmful. So the way I'm going to justify myself is by disproving everything this guy says about the game. Here is the document. So what I am going to do is I'm going to go through this point by point, and I'll tell you why everything that's written here is completely wrong. Alright, paragraph 1. Mythos of Apes humorously panned healing parses as irrelevant in clips 1 and 2. But why exactly are healing parses irrelevant? Here, I will attempt to answer this question. I will also go further than this by arguing that healing parses are also harmful. Okay? Well, I suppose I'll start off by watching these clips to see what Mythos of Apes has to say about healing.
If a healer comes to me at any point, if a healer ever talks about healing meters, instant decline, I'll never talk to you again, you will never be accepted into my game. Any healer who cares about healing meters is fucking brain dead. Oh, Min, I'm healing Warlocks, life tapping, bro, look at my healing palaces. Shut the fuck up.
Wow. Truly riveting argument presented there. Let's see what the second clip has to say.
Do you think healing meters matter? Okay, this is what I think about healing meters. If you apply it to my guild, and you include the word healing meters, I will scroll up, yeah, like this, scroll, I will go to the bin, and you're deleted. You talk about healing meters as a healer, I don't need you. You can find a different guild.
That clip was even worse than the last one. He basically just said healing parses are bad because they're bad. Wow. Alright, well, let's talk about the one and only argument that he had for why healing parses are irrelevant. And that argument was because Warlocks can damage themselves with life tap, and as a healer, you can heal through that damage and it will increase your overall healing. Even more egregious is that there are some healers out there that tell the Warlocks to constantly life tap throughout the whole fight so that those healers can constantly heal the Warlocks and therefore parse well. And for that reason alone, this guy thinks that healing parses are irrelevant. That is his argument. So right off the bat, this argument is just really stupid, because the amount of healers in the world that actually tell the Warlocks to life tap on purpose so that they can parse is an extremely small percentage of healers, if any at all. It's more of a myth than anything. And regardless, just because an extremely small amount of players try to cheese their logs doesn't mean that everyone's logs are irrelevant. You know what it means? It means that their logs are irrelevant, not everyone else's. You could just as easily apply this argument to DPSers. There's lots of bosses that have ads. Some guilds don't have all the DPSers swapped to the ads. Instead, they have 1 or 2 DPSers swapped to the ads so that they can parse. You've probably all seen guilds do that before. It's called cheesing. But just because there are some pathetic losers out there who need to cheese their parses to make themselves feel better, doesn't mean that everyone else's legitimate parses don't matter. Now, on the other hand, if you're just healing the life tap damage normally, and the Warlocks are tapping a normal amount, then usually, that's a good thing to do. When I did Lady Vash, I'd always put Rejuve on the Warlocks right as they started life tapping for phase 2, because the boss can literally hit them with lightning and kill them right as they're fucking tapping, so I'm literally preventing them from dying by pre-healing the life tap damage, and it's also improving my parse, so it's literally a win-win. In any case, life tap damage is extremely minimal compared to the amount of damage that most bosses do. So healing life tap damage from Warlocks won't even increase your HPS by that much. So no matter which way you slice it, this argument is just ridiculous. Now I'm going to assume that this Mythos guy just doesn't know what he's talking about in regards to healing, because if he actually had more of an argument than just talking about life tap bullshit, those clips probably would have been included in this document, since why would they not be? It would literally bolster this guy's argument, the guy who wrote the document. But since those were the only 2 clips that were included, I think it's just safe to assume that Maitaz has no fucking clue what he's talking about. And the person writing this document also probably has no clue what he's talking about, since he decided to include those idiotic clips in here. But I'm going to keep reading to see if that's actually the case. Okay, next paragraph. On the surface, parsing and healing seems to be a competition between healers of the same spec across all logged raids, as is the case for DPS parsing. However, the competition turns out to be mainly one amongst the healers inside each raid group rather than between raid groups. Why is this? It is because healing is a zero-sum game. If you and I are healing as a team, every health point that you heal is a health point that I cannot heal, and vice versa. Additionally, under normal conditions where players are not dying, there is not an abundance of health points to heal. The total damage taken is precisely equal to the total amount healed. These 2 paragraphs don't really mean anything yet. But let's see what conclusion the writer has come to based on the ideas that he has just presented. One consequence of this is large differences in healing parses based on the number of healers present. The total amount of possible healing is generally fixed, so bringing more healers divides that fixed amount among more healers, leading to lower parses for all of them. True. This effect is even more drastic considering that healers typically account for only 15 to 30% of the total raid size, so even a change of plus or minus 1 healer in a 25-man raid environment makes a large difference. Furthermore, these effects are not shared by DPS. Not true. As we will discuss later, bringing more DPS players does not, in general, lead to the existing DPS players doing less DPS. That's true. You know what it does too? It leads to the existing DPS players doing more DPS, because the boss dies faster. So that is literally just wrong. But whatever. Let's talk about the idea that healing parses are affected by the amount of healers that are present, and if that proves that healing parses are irrelevant. Well, first off, what is the reason that guilds bring more than the standard amount of healers on any particular boss fight? Do you know why? It's because their healers suck. So right off the bat, arguing that bringing more healers makes your parse worse is a pointless argument, because if your healers were actually good at the game, you wouldn't need to be overhealing bosses in the first place. So what do I mean when I say a good healer? In my opinion, a good healer has all of these qualities. A good healer can predict and prepare for incoming damage well, they react to damage quickly, they manage mana well, and also go at the end of the fight, not sooner or later. They deal with high damage situations as effectively and efficiently as possible. They avoid overhealing and getting sniped as much as possible. And they keep priority targets alive, but don't necessarily only heal priority targets. Now, if you are able to master all of these elements of healing, what will happen is you will be able to parse really well. And you will also be able to keep many more players alive than the average healer can. The average healer struggles with just keeping their priority targets alive, or even identifying who their priority targets should be. How many times have your shitty healers been assigned to heal something and they just constantly fail to do so? I know my co-healers have. I have wiped so many times to people dying to deadly poison or holy fire on Illidari Council because the healers assigned to heal those players can't fucking see the debuff on their raid frames, or their awareness is so bad that they can't react to it fast enough. I've had the tank die on Muru like 10 times because the holy paladin can't land a single heal on the tank before he dies, even though he's been assigned to heal that tank. But if you actually had good healers, like healers who could parse legitimately, you can not only keep your priority targets alive easily, but you simultaneously do a shit ton of healing to everyone else in the raid, because if you weren't able to do that, you wouldn't be parsing in the first place. Therefore, since your raid is much more likely to survive with healers that are able to parse versus healers that are not able to parse, you can very easily underheal bosses, which will make everyone's parse even higher. But here's my point. Underhealing doesn't reduce the legitimacy of healing parses, does it? Because the only guilds that are actually able to underheal in the first place without using extreme grandpa strats are the ones that have healers who are good at parsing in the first place. So let's keep reading. One might now propose that Warcraft log should simply make brackets by number of healers for healing parses in a similar manner to how it handles item level brackets. This change would be an improvement. No, it wouldn't. But I contend that these improved healing parses would still be irrelevant and harmful. A healing parse first mindset leads to competition between healers on the same team. This is harmful because having healers in the same raid compete in a given boss encounter does not improve the efficiency or effectiveness of the raid as a whole. They should instead be focused on improving their synchronization and teamwork, allowing for fewer healers to be brought and or for greater availability of healer GCDs and mana for damaging the boss, both of which cause the boss to die faster. Okay, let's talk about his first argument. That argument is having a heal parse mindset does not increase the efficiency or effectiveness of the raid as a whole. What does increase the efficiency or effectiveness of the raid as a whole is to instead have the healers focus on synchronization and teamwork. That is the argument. So the first issue I have with the statement is what he means when he says synchronization and teamwork. I assume he's talking about healing assignments because usually how a boss will go during progression is the healers will start off healing whoever they want, and then as people start dying, the guild will start to assign healers to specific targets so that those players will stop dying, and so that the healers aren't stepping on each other's toes as much. Here's the thing about that. The best way to do healing assignments is to play to your healing class's strengths, and if you play to your class's strengths, the healers will be able to output the maximum amount of healing that they can do. In TBC, each healer is designed to have clear-cut strengths and weaknesses, and here they are. So as an example, let me describe to you what the optimal healing assignments would be for Eridar twins. You would have the Wrestler Druid prioritize healing tanks, not necessarily only healing the tanks, but prioritize healing the tanks, because that is how Wrestler Druids do the most HPS. 3-stack Life Bloom is OP as fuck, especially on tanks, since it has the least chance of overhealing on a tank. The Wrestler Shaman would prioritize healing Flameseer because Chain Heal is perfect for healing high amounts of damage on random players, and Flameseer affects random players. So if a Wrestler Shaman perfectly Chain Heals the Flameseers as a priority, they will do the maximum amount of HPS that they can do, and therefore they will parse really well. The Holy Pally should also heal Flameseer, but they should specifically prioritize Conflict healing, because none of the other healing classes can heal that specific kind of damage as efficiently and effectively as a Holy Pally can. What that means is that they can pump Holy Lights without overhealing, because none of the other healers are really incentivized to heal Conflict as of just minor like HOTS, which results in higher HPS and therefore better parse for the Holy Paladin. And lastly, the Holy Priest or Disc Priest assignment is to pump raid healing with COH or Renew on anyone that has Flame Touched or Flameseer. And if the Holy Priest really knows what they're doing, which most of them don't, they will use Prayer of Mending on every single Flameseer so that it will bounce properly. By doing those optimal healing assignments, every healer will be playing to their class's strengths, and thereby maximizing HPS and keeping everyone alive. The only issue you will have with these healing assignments is if some of your healers are bad at the game and letting their priority targets die, in which case you will need to force other healers to deviate from their assignments a little bit to compensate for the bad healers. But if you are a healer that's good at parsing, you will already be helping the other healers out with their healing assignments while also keeping your healing assignments alive, because that is how you parse well. The reason this person thinks that healers should focus on synchronization and teamwork is because there are a lot of bad healers out there that can't figure out how to play to their class's strengths, and they also don't know how to maximize their HPS on any particular boss fight. I have literally seen streams of Wrestler Druids where they spam 1-stack Life Bloom on the raid while not even maintaining HOTS on the tank, and they just let the tanks die every pull, as well as just not doing good HPS. Like I've seen a Wrestler Druid put 3-stack Life Bloom on 5 players, even though 3 out of those 5 players aren't even taking damage most of the time. When you have healers like that in your guild, the raid leader has to assign the bad healers to who they should be healing because they can't figure it out for themselves. Or the raid leader compensates by forcing healers to tank heal when they shouldn't need to prioritize tank healing in the first place. And only after wiping numerous times and optimizing the healer assignments and probably adding an extra healer to compensate, will you get to a point where you can finally kill the boss. But guess what? If you had healers that were actually good at parsing, you wouldn't need to go through all those wipes and all that healing assignment bullshit in the first place. You would literally just pull the boss, and nobody would ever die to healable damage because the healers would already know who they should be prioritizing their healing on in order to maximize their HPS, which is exactly what healing assignments are trying to achieve in the first place. And don't be like one of those dumb fuck retards on the WoW forums that say healing parses are irrelevant because if everyone just does the mechanics correctly, then the boss will die and I won't have to heal a lot. Yeah, okay. Well, here's the thing about that. Unless you're in a top world guild, everyone fucks up mechanics. Everyone wipes the bosses. Everyone takes unnecessary damage. Because, you want to know why? Because we're not robots. And it is the healers who actually understand the game and can parse well that can heal through the most amount of fuck-ups and the most amount of unnecessary damage, which allows you to kill the boss faster. Now, there is one downside to having a heal parsing mindset, and that downside is emergency healing. Emergency healing requires the use of low HPM spells like Flash Heal and Powered Shield, which you would want to avoid using if you are trying to parse. However, throwing out an emergency heal here and there to save someone's life doesn't actually reduce your HPS by that much. What does reduce your HPS by a lot is if you're overusing these kind of spells like Flash Heal and Powered Shield, which is what bad healers tend to do. Also, the healers that can parse well, consistently, and legitimately just have better awareness and they react better to emergency situations. So while having a healing parsing mindset can be bad sometimes, the healers that can parse well are the ones that actually have the skill required to predict, react, and save your raid from emergency situations. So let's bring it back to this statement. Having a heal parse mindset does not increase the efficiency or effectiveness of the raid as a whole. What does increase the efficiency and effectiveness of the raid as a whole is to instead have the healers focus on synchronization and teamwork. I have just proven that this is blatantly untrue. Having a heal parse mindset does increase the efficiency and effectiveness of the raid as a whole most of the time, because healers that can parse well know how to play to their class's strengths, and they know how to prioritize healing on the players who need it at any particular time, which is what allows you to parse in the first place. Additionally, doing high overall HPS takes a big load off of the other healers, which reduces the risk of getting overwhelmed by damage and having healers go out of mana preemptively. As a final tidbit for you, if you play a Holy Paladin, you should never not be in the heal parsing mindset, because the way that Holy Paladins are designed, they do the most healing by healing whichever player is closest to death at any particular time, because Holy Paladins are spot healers. Holy Light has the least chance of overhealing when you use it on someone who's about to die. So while the other healers should break out of the heal parsing mindset sometimes in like emergency situations to save someone's life, Holy Paladins should never not be in the heal parsing mindset. Therefore, the Holy Paladins that parse well on Warcraft logs are literally just doing the best thing for the raid. Now let's address the final point. They should instead be focused on improving their synchronization and teamwork, allowing for fewer healers to be brought, and or for greater availability of healer GCDs and mana for damaging the boss, both of which causes the boss to die faster. Okay, first off, if healers are ever doing damage, that means that you have too many healers, or there's just literally no damage going out. So I don't really know what the point is of even suggesting that healers should do damage. Not to mention that healer damage is extremely unnoticeable and irrelevant. Do you want to know what the best way to allow for fewer healers is so that you can maximize damage on the boss? It's not teamwork, it's not synchronization, it's not healing assignments. You know what it is? It's having healers who are good at parsing. Because like I said before, good healers know how to play to their class's strengths, and they are also good at these things here. So it will be massively easier to keep people alive and meet the HPS requirement for every boss with healers that know what they are doing. I've literally been in a guild this expansion that had 3 players, including myself, that had the skill required to parse 99 percentile consistently, and we 3-healed almost every boss in Tempest Keep and Serpentine Caverns with a guild that has shitty DPS. Try doing that with healers that can't parse well and see what happens. Next paragraph. The boss dying faster is important even if raid team has no explicit goal of maximizing speed. This is because the shorter the engagement, the fewer opportunities there are for mistakes to be made or for unfortunate events to occur. This observation deserves its own post, but I will not discuss it further here. No disagreements from me. Moving on. Another way of considering this, also through the perspective of game theory, is that a parse-first mindset destroys functioning equilibria between incoming damage and outgoing healing that healing assignments and compositions are designed to create. If each healer has a goal to parse as high as possible, he or she will be incentivized to not follow healing assignments and to deviate from assignments in ways that increase heals per second. In the language of game theory, a particular outcome of the healing game cannot be an equilibrium if there is any incentive for a player to unilaterally change his or her action. For more details on this concept of equilibrium in the context of game theory, see this link that I will certainly not be clicking. Wow. That is the nerdiest thing I've ever read in my entire life. And the worst part is, none of it is actually true. So let's talk about the first part, which I've highlighted here. This is already wrong because of what I said before. Any healer that's good at parsing will already know who their priority healing target should be, because that is how you play to your class's strengths and do the most overall HPS. On top of that, deviating from healing assignments isn't a bad thing a lot of the time. In fact, most of the time, it's a good thing, because if I'm on a boss like Felmis, for example, I don't need to only heal the tank as a Resto Druid, because that would be overkill. I would literally end the boss fight with most of my mana, which is a waste. Instead, I can keep the tank alive and also spam Rejuve on the raid to help out with the raid healing, which takes a huge load off of the other healers, and that is the optimal way to keep the most players alive and to maximize HPS, so this part is completely wrong. The second part talks about equilibrium. If everyone would just stick to their healing assignments, a perfect harmony of healing will exist and nobody will ever die to healable damage. Here's the issue with that. The healers that are good at parsing are the ones who are actually healing their assignments properly, and they're also helping everyone else with their assignments. It is the bad healers, the healers who can't parse, that ruin the equilibrium, because they are the ones who either fail to keep the priority targets alive, or they're only healing their priority targets and letting the rest of the raid die. Next paragraph. Let's now contrast this with parsing for DPS. When damaging a boss, there is no scarcity problem for available hit points to remove from the boss, because the boss has a very large health pool, and that health pool is available to damage for the duration of the encounter. The encounter is finished by definition when there is no enemy health to deplete. If you and I are both damaging the boss and I increase my DPS, that does not cause your DPS to decrease, nor does it prevent you from increasing your DPS. Again, doing more DPS makes the boss die faster, which makes everybody else's DPS go up. It's literally the same effect as adding or removing healers, but in reverse. Not that it really matters though, because this video is about healing. Why healing parses are irrelevant. That's what we're talking about. What is the point of comparing it to DPS, when DPS is a completely different role, with a completely different set of priorities, and a completely different dynamic? What is the point of even comparing the two? Next paragraph. Note this analysis does not consider allocation of damage increasing resources such as temporary buffs. These resources are often scarce, and the game to acquire them is often zero-sum, just as finding friendly missing hit points to heal is. For example, if there will be one innervate available for the encounter, but there are two mages who desire it, only one will receive it, making it unavailable for the other mage. This facet of DPS parsing is potentially an inefficiency for ranking player performance based on parses across different raid groups, and it is an interesting characteristic that is worthy of independent consideration. However, we will not be discussing it more here. Thank God for that. I would love to not discuss that, because you would probably come to all the wrong conclusions, just like you have with everything so far. Next paragraph. Thus, parsing for DPS is mainly a competition across all raid groups instead of within raid groups, as is the case for healing. The importance of the inter-group competitive factors for DPS, like the acquisition of scarce buffs, does of course vary across specs and encounters, hence as mentioned above, we do not consider these factors here. Look, whether you believe that healing is a competition across all raid groups or within raid groups, it doesn't make one bit of difference, okay? Because that opinion doesn't actually prove anything. If you want to talk about why healing parses are irrelevant, then talk about what the healers that are parsing are actually doing compared to what the healers that aren't parsing are doing. Don't talk about whether you believe it's a competition with yourself, your guild, other guilds, or anyone else, because it doesn't matter. It's just your opinion. Technically, it doesn't have to be a competition at all. You could literally just play the game and never look at details or Warcraft logs. So moving on. In contrast, for healing, a focus on parsing will lead to better parses but not better raids. Not true. I claim that better healing parses do not reflect better individual healing performance. Not true. In fact, I also claim that individual healing performance is quite difficult to define, because it is so context dependent and resists simple quantification, unlike DPS. That's also not true. Individual healing performance is very easy to define. All you have to do is ask the question, which players are dying due to lack of healing? Oh, the Flamesphere targets keep dying? Wow. No shit. Who do we blame for that? Well, let's analyze the healers. Is it the Holy Priest? Is he the one to blame? The guy who's playing his character to his class's strengths, renewing everyone with Flame Touch, using Prayer of Mending on the Flameseers, using Circle of Healing as much as possible to maximize HPS. Is that guy the one to blame? Or is it the Resto Shaman who's doing like 1k HPS because he can't actually see Flameseer on his raid frames, or he's not using Max Rank Chain Heal to heal the Flameseers, or because he's not using Chain Heal at all, or he's getting sniped on most of his healing? Like, whose fault do you think it would be in that scenario? It's obviously the Shaman's fault, because if the Shaman was actually good at parsing his healing assignments, the Flameseer players would literally never die, because healing Flameseer as effectively and efficiently as possible is literally how you parse as a Resto Shaman. Next paragraph. Team healing performance, on the other hand, is more amenable to simple, quantifiable definitions. For example, one could consider metrics such as deaths attributed mainly due to lack of sufficient healing per healer present. Normalizing by healer team size is important to prevent cheesing the metric by simply bringing more healers for extreme levels of safety. Of course, attributing the cause of death to insufficient healing may not be easy to do well automatically, so comparing healing teams across a large number of different raid teams by this metric may not be feasible, but in principle, I would argue a focus on team-based healing metrics would be more fruitful than focusing on individual healing parses as they currently exist. I would do neither of those things. I would suggest that everyone focus on a class-based healing metric to see if each player is playing to their class's strengths. If they are, and you're just lacking raw healing because your healers are bad at these things here, then you can be like, okay, do we need to add another healer? Or can we have one of our current healers deviate from their assignment a little bit to help pick up the slack? Next paragraph. Ultimately, one should always consider what makes the entire raid function more efficiently as a unit. Because of the structural and mechanical reality of healing as described in this post, wow, those are two words that don't actually mean anything. Healing parses do not effectively capture an individual healer's contribution to the efficiency and effectiveness of the raid group. Yeah, that's just not true. So basically, every argument that was presented in this document is either untrue or completely irrelevant, and hopefully I've been able to properly explain to you why that is. Now, what I haven't done is I haven't proven to you why healing parses matter. All I've proven to you is why this document is bullshit. So the important question still remains. Do I think healing parses matter? And when I say matter, what I mean is, are healing parses a representation of player skill? Can you go on Warcraft logs and look at the highest parses on your server and legitimately say those are the best healers? And my answer to that is sometimes. It depends on the boss, and it depends on the expansion. Some bosses don't do any damage, like Atum and the Huntsman, and basically every boss in Mount Hyjal. And some bosses do damage that doesn't need to be healed up as fast as possible, like Gruul's Shatter or Brutalis's Slashes. For these bosses, healing parses are not always a representation of player skill, unless of course you were able to get a good parse on them without padding on those abilities that I just mentioned. When it comes to expansions, healing parses aren't a representation of skill as much during fast-paced expansions like Wrath and Mop, where the health bars move up and down really fast and all the healers are designed to have an abundance of mana to work with. The reason the parses don't represent skill as much in these metas is because of the things I listed earlier. In TBC, this is what it means to be a good healer. In Wrath, 3 of these elements of healing either don't matter at all or they matter a lot less, so being a good healer that can parse well in Wrath of the Lich King takes a lot less skill. Even worse is retail healing. On retail, none of these elements exist to the same extent that they do in TBC, because the classes are designed with a shit ton of smart healing, powerful instant cast healing, and frequent raid cooldowns. So the only skill-based part of healing on retail is the fact that you have a lot of spells. Also in fast-paced metas, bosses can't be designed to truly challenge healers from a raw HPS perspective, because you would literally be approaching Swifty one-shot territory. Take Erdar Twins, for example. If Erdar Twins was a boss in Wrath, it would literally be a complete joke because of how much healing every healer does relative to the size of the health pools, how much haste every healer has, and how abundant mana is in Wrath. Like, it would literally just be a joke. The only way to make Erdar Twins hard in Wrath would be to double the damage of every ability. But what happens when you double the damage of every ability on Erdar Twins? You would literally just get Swifty one-shot by any combination of abilities, and you can't design bosses like that. You can't have it so that people are getting Swifty one-shot by unavoidable damage, because every boss would literally be like Phase 3 of Lady Vash, where you can just get one-shot randomly and it's not even your fault. So there are no bosses in Wrath or Mop that truly require or even incentivize healers to pump as much HPS as possible. So do healing meters really matter? Not really. Contrast this with the slowest paced expansion, Cataclysm. Look at the health bars on the left. Notice how players are not instantly topped up after taking damage. In an expansion like this, where the unavoidable damage that bosses do is not easily healed up, where healers are extremely limited on mana, how important is it to have healers who know what they're doing and can pump as much healing as possible? It is extremely important. So in an expansion like Cataclysm, healing parses do matter. Now the final thing I would like to talk about is top guilds, like the guild the guy in the clips was in. These people have a lot of influence on the community's perception of things, such as healing parses. However, a lot of these players' opinions on the game are extremely biased to the way that they play the game, and therefore irrelevant to the majority of the player base. Not everything they say is, but a lot of it is. Healing Parses might not matter for the top speedrunning guilds that use comps that the majority of guilds don't use or can't use, whose strategies are way more intricate than what the majority of guilds use or are capable of using, who kills bosses way faster than the majority of guilds do, and where everyone in the guild is actually good at the game and good at avoiding damage. Healing Parses might not matter for them. But 99% of the guilds in the world don't play that game. The way 99% of the guilds in the world experience rating is entirely different than that of the top speedrunning guilds. And these guilds, you are rating with a combination of good players, decent players, and bad players, where people take unavoidable damage all the time, where strats are not perfect and cannot be executed perfectly, where DPS checks cannot be met. In this environment, having healers who can parse well is actually important. So if you're someone like Mytaz or whatever his fucking name is, don't go on your fucking stream and tell all of your Twitch chat normies that healing parses don't matter when one, you don't even have any good arguments or understanding about the topic to begin with, and two, you rate it an entirely different way than 99% of the guilds in the world do. Hell, you'd be better off arguing that DPS parses don't matter because the players in those top guilds that use the sweatiest fucking comps and strategies and professions and all that bullshit are the only ones who are actually able to get the top parses because it is literally impossible to compete when your guild kills bosses way slower. Like, you can literally play perfectly and you still have absolutely no chance at competing with those guys unless you are in the top speedrunning guild yourself. So are DPS parses actually a good representation of skill in TPC? Not really. They're more of a representation of what guild you're in. I suspect Wrath will be a little bit different and DPS parses will be more of a representation of skill, but to think that DPS parses are a representation of skill in TPC, considering how many factors affect DPS parses and the fact that almost all DPS classes are 1 or 2 button face roll bullshit, that's fucking cringe. Anyways, that's my video. Thanks for watching.